She thought she was just serving coffee to a quiet old widow until a billionaire walked in and revealed a secret that would change her life forever. Maya Brooks was 26 years old, and life hadn't exactly been easy for her. She lived in a small town called Worthington, Ohio, a quiet place where everybody knew everybody, and most people led simple lives. Maya worked as a waitress at a local diner called Maple Street Diner. It was a cozy little place with red leather booths, squeaky wooden floor, and the smell of pancakes and coffee floating in the air from sunrise to sunset. She had been working there for nearly 4 years, ever since she dropped out of college to take care of her mother. Her mom, Linda, had been diagnosed with a chronic illness that made her weak and tired most days. There were hospital bills, rent, medications, and all the little things that life threw at them. Maya had no choice but to become the adult in the house, the one who had to hold everything together. She never complained, though. She just kept going, one shift at a time, $1 at a time, every morning. She tied her dark brown hair into a ponytail, wore her green and white diner uniform, and headed out before sunrise. She didn't have a car, so she walked the 15 minutes from her small apartment to the diner, no matter the weather. Rain, snow, or summer heat, she never missed a day. She was known to be kind, reliable, someone who could make even the grumpiest customers smile. Among all the regular faces at the diner, there was one customer Maya always noticed, an elderly woman who came in every Thursday morning at exactly 8:15. Her name was Mrs. Eleanor Green. She was quiet, soft-spoken, and always sat at the booth near the window. She wore the same faded gray shawl every time, no matter the season, and carried a small brown handbag that looked like it had stories of its own. Her hair was snow-white and tied into a neat bun, and her eyes, though gentle, always looked a little distant, like they were searching for something far away. Eleanor never ordered anything fancy. Just a cup of black coffee and a slice of toast. No butter, no jam. She never brought a phone, a book, or even a newspaper. She just sat there, sipping her coffee slowly, staring out the window as the town went about its usual rhythm. Most of the other waitresses barely noticed her. They assumed she was just another lonely widow, living off her pension, maybe forgotten by her family. Some even whispered that she was a bit strange, because she never spoke unless spoken to. But Maya never saw her that way. From the very beginning, there was something about Eleanor that caught her attention, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet, almost invisible kind of sadness. Maya made it a point to serve Eleanor herself whenever she was on duty. Then she would smile warmly, place the coffee down gently, and sometimes leave a small chocolate or a flower from the counter beside her toast. Eleanor never asked for it, but Maya thought little kindnesses mattered, especially for someone who looked like life had taken more from her than it had given. Sometimes Eleanor would say, "Thank you, dear," in a soft voice that was barely above a whisper. Maya would nod and say, "You're welcome, Mrs. Green." That was their usual exchange. It was short, but it felt like a conversation between two people who understood silence better than most. One Thursday morning, Eleanor walked in looking more tired than usual. Maya noticed that she was limping slightly and seemed slower. Without saying a word, Maya helped her to her seat, placed her usual order, and brought her a cushion to sit on. Eleanor gave her a look, not quite a smile, but something close, and simply said, "You're very kind." Maya didn't ask any questions. She never pried into people's lives unless they offered their stories. She just nodded and went back to her work, checking on Eleanor now and then from the counter. As the weeks passed, Maya started noticing little things. Eleanor's coat had a tear that hadn't been there before. Her shoes looked older than before, the soles almost worn out. And once, when Eleanor went to pay, her hands trembled as she pulled out a few wrinkled dollar bills. That day, Maya quietly covered the toast from her own tips and said, "You dropped this." As she handed back a few dollars to Eleanor, Eleanor looked at her for a long second, her eyes slightly moist. "Thank you," she said again, this time with more weight in her voice. From then on, Maya made it a point to always be extra gentle with Eleanor. Sometimes she wrapped the toast in foil when it looked like she hadn't etten enough. Other times, she refilled her coffee without charging her. It wasn't much, but Maya believed that people like Eleanor deserved to be treated with dignity, not pity, just care. Maya's coworkers didn't understand why she gave Eleanor so much attention. Never tips, one of them complained. And she barely talks. Why do you bother? Maya just smiled and said, some people give more than money, just have to look closely. She didn't know why she felt so drawn to Eleanor. Maybe it was because she saw something familiar. In her, the same quiet strength her own mother had. Maybe it was the way she sat alone every week, like she was waiting for someone who would never come. Or maybe Maya just had a soft heart for people who looked forgotten. One rainy Thursday, Eleanor came in drenched. Her shawl was soaked, and her fingers were freezing. Maya quickly got her a warm towel, dried her hands, and offered her a hot bowl. Of soup on the house? Eleanor looked surprised. I didn't order this, she said quietly. I know, Maya replied. But you look like you need it today. That was the first time Eleanor smiled. A real smile, small and shy, but genuine. I used to love soup, she said softly, staring at the bowl. You still can, Maya said, and walked away so she wouldn't make her feel uncomfortable. From then on, something changed. Eleanor started talking just a little, but it was more than before. She mentioned how she used to live near Lake Erie, how she once had a garden full of roses, and how she loved rain, even if it made her joints ache. She never talked about family, and Maya never asked. She let her speak as much or as little as she wanted. One day, as Maya was wiping down Eleanor's table after she left, she noticed a photo on the seat. It was old and black and white. In the photo, a young Eleanor stood beside a tall man in front of a beautiful mansion. They looked happy, elegant, almost like they belonged in a movie. The man had a strong jaw, a confident smile, and eyes full of life. Maya gently placed the photo in an envelope and kept it safe behind the counter. When Eleanor returned the next week, Maya handed it to her. I believe this belongs to you. Eleanor looked at it, and for a moment, her hands stopped moving. She took the envelope, held it close to her chest, and said, I thought I lost this years ago. You dropped it here last week, Maya said softly. Is that your husband? Eleanor nodded. Her eyes looked far away as he died. A long time ago, after that, everything else sort of disappeared. Maya didn't say anything. She just stood quietly beside her. He was a good man, Eleanor continued. Strong, brilliant, and he loved me more than anyone ever has. After the accident, I lost more than just him. I lost our home, our name, everything. There was a long silence between them, filled with unspoken pain. I'm sorry, Maya finally said. Don't be, Eleanor replied, folding the photo carefully. Some things are meant to be lost, but some memories, they stay.
After
That conversation, Eleanor seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She didn't say more, but Maya could tell something had shifted between them. It was no longer just a waitress and a customer. It was something closer to a quiet friendship, built not on words, but on simple acts of care. Then one Thursday, Eleanor didn't show up. Maya thought maybe it was the weather. It had snowed heavily that week. But the next week passed, and still no Eleanor. Maya waited each Thursday, glancing at the door every time the bell rang, hoping it would be her. Weeks turned into a month. Maya asked around, called the nearby. Care homes even checked with the post office, in case Eleanor had moved, but there was no trace. It was like she had vanished, as quietly as she had lived. Maya missed her in a way she couldn't explain. There was an emptiness in the diner on Thursdays now. That booth by the window sat silently, like it too was waiting for Eleanor to return. The coffee pot felt heavier, the toast less warm. Maya still served customers, still smiled, still went home to care for her mom. But something inside her felt different. She didn't know who Eleanor really was. She didn't know where she had come from or where she had gone. But she knew one thing for sure. She had mattered. Her presence, her quietness, her sadness, her stories, they had meant something. To Maya, they always would. And somewhere, deep in her heart, Maya hoped that wherever Eleanor had gone, she knew she had not been forgotten. That someone, even if just a diner waitress, had seen her, really seen her, and cared. She had no idea then that Eleanor's story was far from over, that her kindness would soon come back to her in a way no one could have imagined. It would all begin the day a stranger walked into the diner asking for Maya by name. The weeks kept passing, and Maya Brooks continued to look toward the door of the diner every Thursday morning. Her heart still hoped that one day Mrs. Eleanor Green would walk in again, wearing her faded shawl and soft smile. But the door never opened for her again. It had been almost 2 months since Eleanor disappeared without a word. The booth near the window sat empty, almost like it was grieving too. Maya didn't talk much about Eleanor to the other staff. Most of them had forgotten her, but Maya couldn't. There had been something about the quiet way Eleanor carried herself, the sadness in her eyes, and the unspoken pain behind her silence that had made a deep mark on Maya's heart. She often wondered what had happened. Had Eleanor gotten sick? Did she move away? Was she okay? Or worse, ... Was she gone? One morning, while wiping down the booth, Eleanor always sat in. Maya found herself thinking about that black and white photo. Again, the one Eleanor had dropped. It had shown a completely different version of the woman Maya had served for months. In that picture, Eleanor had been radiant, standing beside a man in front of a large, beautiful mansion. Maya still remembered how her hands had trembled slightly as she looked at it, and how Eleanor's voice had softened when she said, "He died a long time ago." Then after that, everything disappeared. What had she meant by that? Why she'd spoken that day had sounded like a whisper from the past, like someone who had been forgotten by the world long before she disappeared from the diner. It didn't seem fair to Maya. How could someone so kind, so graceful, just vanish without anyone noticing or asking where she went? But there wasn't much Maya could do. She still had bills to pay. Her mother still needed her care and her work days. At the diner remained busy, yet every now and then, when a customer sat near the window or ordered black coffee and toast, Maya felt her heart pause for a second. She missed Eleanor more than she could say. One cold Tuesday morning, the diner was quieter than usual. The skies outside were gray, and a light snow had begun to fall. Maya had just poured herself a cup of coffee during a short break when the door to the diner opened, and a man walked in. He didn't look like the usual customers. He wore a long, black coat and polished shoes, and his salt and pepper hair was neatly combed back. There was something sharp about his presence, something powerful. His eyes scanned the room once before he walked directly toward the counter. Maya straightened up. The man approached and spoke in a deep, calm voice. "Excuse me, are you Maya Brooks?" She nodded, surprised. "Yes, that's me." He held out his hand. "My name is Richard Carrington. I believe you knew my aunt, Eleanor Green." Maya stared at him, confused. Eleanor Green. Richard gave a soft smile. She went by Green in her final years, but that wasn't her real name. She was Eleanor Carrington, my father's sister. Maya's heart skipped a beat. This man. He looked like the one in the photo. It was the eyes. It's the same sharp, intelligent look that the man beside Eleanor had in that old photograph. Maya blinked, trying to process what he was saying. "Wait, are you saying she changed her name?" Richard nodded slowly. "Yes, she disappeared from our family more than 30 years ago. No one heard from her again. Not until recently." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she placed her coffee down. "What happened to her? Where is she?" Richard hesitated for a moment before replying. "She passed away peacefully, about 5 weeks ago, in a care home not far from here. She used a different identity, but she left behind a letter. Your name was in it." Maya's breath caught in her throat. "My name?" He nodded again. "She wrote about a young woman named Maya Brooks, a waitress at a diner. Someone who treated her kindly when the rest of the world walked past her." Maya felt something warm and painful grow inside her chest. Her throat tightened and she had to sit down. I just did what anyone would do," she said quietly. She seemed lonely. She never asked for anything. Richard smiled, but his eyes were heavy with emotion. Most people don't go out of their way for someone who gives nothing in return, but you did. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Okay. Inside was a copy of Eleanor's handwritten letter. The writing was neat, but slightly shaky. As Maya read it, tears welled up in her eyes. Eleanor had written about the first time Maya had brought her a small chocolate. She wrote about how Maya smiled every time she served her, how she noticed even when Eleanor looked cold or tired, and how she had never once made her feel like a burden. She mentioned the soup, the wrapped toast, and the day Maya had returned. The photograph without asking questions. She saw me, Eleanor had written. Not for who I used to be, not for what I had lost, but for the woman I was, right there in that booth, with a heart still beating and a mind still remembering. Maya's hand covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know she felt all that. Richard placed a hand gently on the counter. That's the thing about kindness. You don't do it expecting recognition, but it leaves a mark, a deep one. You gave her something our entire family failed to give her in her final years: dignity. Maya wiped her tears and looked up at him. But why did she leave your family? Why was she hiding? Richard sighed, sitting down across from her. It's a long and painful story. My Aunt Eleanor was once one of the brightest lights in our family. She married my Uncle Samuel Carrington, a brilliant man, a businessman, and one of the founding partners of Carrington Enterprises. They built a life together, full of dreams. But after Samuel died in a private plane crash, there was a legal war over the company. Eleanor was heartbroken and accused of blocking the board's decisions. There were rumors, accusations. The media made her out to be controlling and unstable. Eventually, my father, her own brother, sided with the company. She felt betrayed by her family. He paused, his voice heavy with guilt. She disappeared. Just like that, she gave away her properties, vanished from the public eye, and refused contact. We tried looking for her. I was young back then, but I never forgot her. She was kind, gentle, but something broke inside her after Samuel died. Maya listened in silence, stunned, so she just left that life behind. Richard nodded. She changed her name, lived quietly, refused the fortune. When she died, the only name she left behind was yours. Maya shook her head. That can't be right. I didn't do anything special. I'm just a waitress. Didn't even know who she really was. And that, Richard said gently, is exactly why she trusted you. There was a long pause between them. Maya felt like her world had shifted without her noticing. She was wealthy, Maya asked finally, even after giving everything away? Richard smiled slightly. She was smarter than people gave her credit for. She kept one account hidden, and a small estate, a cottage by the lake. She never used it, but she kept it in her name. Now, in her will, it's yours. Maya's mouth dropped open. What? She whispered. She left it to you. The cottage. And the remaining money in her personal account. She wrote that it wasn't just about gratitude. It was because she believed that someone like you would do something meaningful with it. That you'd know what to do with love, not just money. Maya stared at him, speechless. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Richard said kindly. Just know that your actions mattered more than you could ever imagine. The door to the diner opened again, and the soft chime of the bell rang out, but Maya barely noticed. Her world had shifted in one conversation. The woman she had served for almost a year, the quiet, lonely widow, had once been someone powerful, someone elegant, someone full of life and tragedy, and now she had passed her final gift to Maya. The rest of the day passed like a dream. Maya told no one about the conversation. It felt too big, too personal to share just yet. That night, after her shift, she walked home through the falling snow. Her mind full of memories of Eleanor, the way she sipped her coffee slowly, the quiet thank yous, the sad smile. She remembered every Thursday morning like it was still happening. That night, she sat by her mother's bedside and read Eleanor's letter again. This time she read it out loud. Her mother listened quietly, her tired eyes shining with emotion. She saw something in you, her mother said softly. And I'm not surprised. Maya smiled, though her eyes were full of tears. She didn't want recognition. She just wanted to be seen, and Maya had seen her. Not as a customer, not as a stranger, but as a person who still mattered. As she folded the letter and placed it in her drawer, Maya felt a new sense of responsibility growing inside her. Not just because of the cottage or the money, but because Eleanor had trusted her with her memory. With her story, Maya didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing. She would never forget the woman in the shawl who sat by the window, because sometimes the quietest people leave behind the loudest echoes, and sometimes a single act of kindness can change everything. The next few days felt completely unreal to Maya. She still went to work, tied her apron the same way, served coffee and pancakes, and smiled at customers. But everything inside her had changed. Every time she wiped down a table or refilled someone's cup, part of her mind drifted back to Eleanor, her quiet voice, her kind eyes, and now her unbelievable truth. Eleanor Green. The simple widow who came in every Thursday for black coffee and toast wasn't just a lonely old lady. She was Eleanor Carrington, once married to a man whose name still appeared in business magazines and corporate buildings. She had once lived in a mansion, hosted elegant parties, and been part of a family so powerful that their decisions shaped cities. But in the end, she had chosen to disappear and live like a nobody. Only one person had truly seen her in those final years, Maya. And now, that same Eleanor had left something behind for her. Not just a letter, not just thanks. She had left Maya a house, a cottage by the lake, and a large sum of money. Maya still didn't know how much exactly. Richard Carrington hadn't gone into financial details. He'd only said it's enough to change your life. But Maya didn't want to think about money right away. Her heart was too full. She felt grief for Eleanor, even though she hadn't known her for long. She felt shocked by the truth. And she felt a strange kind of weight, not a bad weight, but something serious, something meaningful, like she had been trusted with something sacred. Richard Carrington returned to the diner 2 days later. This time, he wasn't wearing a long black coat. He wore a sweater and jeans and looked more like a regular man than a billionaire. He sat at a table and asked Maya if they could talk again, but only if she was comfortable. She nodded and sat across from him, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "I know this is a lot," he began, "but I didn't want to leave town without telling you everything. I think you deserve to know who Eleanor really was before the world forgot her." Maya listened quietly as he spoke. "She was brilliant," Richard said. "Even as a young woman, she was more than just someone's wife. She was smart, strong, and kind. When she married my Uncle Samuel, they were a power couple. People respected them. Together, they built part of what Carrington Enterprises is today. But then, the crash happened." He paused. Samuel was flying to a business meeting. His plane went down in bad weather. No survivors. That was the day Eleanor's world fell apart, not just emotionally, but financially too. Suddenly, board members started questioning her decisions. The media called her cold, said she was trying to take over the company. Even my own father didn't defend her. She was heartbroken, but worse than that, she was betrayed by the people she thought she could trust. Maya's hands tightened in her lap. She left without a word.
No warning?
No goodbyes. Changed her name, gave up her shares, gave away her mansion. People thought she was mad, but I don't think she was. I think she was done, Maya thought. About the Eleanor she had known, quiet, private, carrying pain behind her soft smile, it made sense now. That kind of pain didn't come from being poor. It came from being forgotten by people who once called you family. "I was a teenager when she left," Richard continued, "and I always remembered her differently. I remembered her baking cookies with me in the summer, reading old books with me, telling stories. I missed her. As I got older and took over the company, I tried looking for her. But she didn't want to be found. Until recently." He reached into his folder and pulled out another document. 2 months before she died. She wrote to me. I was shocked. I hadn't seen her handwriting in 30 years. In the letter, she said she had been following the news, watching me from a distance, and she had one request to meet only once. She asked me to come without press, without lawyers, without anything. Maya leaned in, fully absorbed. Now, I went to the care home she named. She was thinner, quieter, older than I remembered, but she was still her. She smiled when she saw me and she cried. We sat together for hours. She didn't want to talk about the past. She didn't want apologies. She just wanted peace. Richard looked down for a moment. Then she said something strange. She said, I want you to meet someone. Not now, but after I'm gone. Her name is Maya. You'll find her in Worthington, Ohio. She's not famous. She's not rich. But she's real. Maya felt her throat tighten. She told me about you, Richard said. About the soup, the toast, the photo, the silence. She said you made her feel human again. Maya's eyes welled up again. I didn't even know who she was, she said. I didn't do anything special. Richard shook his head. That's exactly why it mattered. You didn't help her because of her name. You helped her because she needed it. Now she's given you a gift. It's not to repay you, but to remind you that people like you still exist. People who care without a reason. He slid the document across the table. This is the deed to her cottage. It's by Lake Monroe, a peaceful place. She kept it hidden from the family. Visited once, it's old, but beautiful. And she wanted you to have it. Maya looked at the paper in disbelief. Her name was printed clearly. Maya Brooks, legal owner. There's also a personal account with some funds, Richard added. She didn't say how you should use it. She said, Maya will know. Maya was quiet for a long time. Her fingers trembled as she touched the edge of the paper. I don't know if I deserve this, she said softly. Richard smiled. Then you're exactly the kind of person who should have it. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Richard stood and placed a small velvet box on the table. She also wanted you to have this. Maya opened it slowly. Inside was a gold pendant with a rose engraved on it. It was delicate, old, and clearly special. She wore that every day until she came to the diner, Richard said. She stopped wearing it after Samuel died, but she told me. When she saw how you treated her, she started believing in good people again. She wanted you to wear it. As a reminder, Maya couldn't speak. She closed the box and held it close to her heart. Thank you, she whispered. Richard nodded, then handed her a business card. If you need anything legal help, renovations, anything, call me. Not as a businessman, as family. Maya nodded. She didn't know what to say. Earl had changed in ways she'd never imagined. And yet, her feet were still on the diner floor. The coffee still brewed behind her. Life still went on. When Richard left, she sat alone at the booth. The same booth Eleanor had sat in for all those Thursdays. She ran her fingers along the edge of the table, feeling every scratch. Every mark. She could almost see Eleanor there again, quiet, warm, sipping coffee, eyes distant but present. She whispered, "Thank you." That evening, Maya walked home. Slower than usual. The snow had stopped, and the stars were beginning to shine. When she reached her apartment, her mother was awake, reading a worn-out book. "How was work?" her mother asked. Maya sat beside her and held her hand. "Different," she said. "Beautiful, and a little bit sad." She told her everything. From the truth about Eleanor's past to the gift she had left behind, her mother listened silently. When Maya finished, her mother squeezed her hand. "She saw something in you, just like I always have." Maya smiled through tears. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about the cottage, the money, the pendant, and the old photo. She thought about how a single person's kindness could echo into someone else's life so deeply. She had served Eleanor toast and coffee, but in return, Eleanor had given her hope, possibility, and a future. And even though Eleanor was gone, Maya felt her presence everywhere. She had no idea what she would do next, but she knew she wouldn't waste it. The next morning, Maya took out the letter Eleanor had written and read it again. One line stood out. "You reminded me that being seen is the greatest gift we can give each other. I see you, Maya, and I hope you never forget that." Maya closed the letter and whispered, "I won't." She folded it gently and placed it inside. the velvet box with the pendant, because some gifts are not made of gold or land or money. Some gifts are made of memory, of love, of being truly seen, even if only for a few minutes a week. At a booth by the window, and that, Maya knew, was priceless. Maya woke up the next morning to the sound of birds outside her window and a soft breeze blowing through the curtains. For a moment, everything felt like a dream. But when she looked at the letter from Eleanor and the gold pendant lying beside it on the table, she knew it wasn't. Everything was real, the truth, the cottage, the inheritance. But more than anything, the memory of Eleanor felt real, like she was still around somehow, watching quietly, just like she always did from her favorite booth. Maya sat at the edge of her bed, holding the pendant in her palm. She ran her thumb over the small engraved rose and remembered how gentle Eleanor's smile was. 1,000 thoughts filled her mind. The cottage by the lake, the money, the responsibility. She had never even dreamed of owning anything, not even a car, let alone a house. And now she had a cottage, gifted to her not by a family member or a friend, but by a woman most people ignored, a woman who had once lived a life of power and wealth, and chose to end her days quietly and alone, until she met Maya. Later that day, Maya called Richard Carrington. She told him she was ready to see the cottage. Richard arranged everything: a car, the keys, and directions to the small lakeside property. Maya took the day off from the diner and left early the next morning. She didn't tell anyone except her mother. It felt too personal, too private to share. The ride to Lake Monroe was quiet. The road curved through tall trees and hills, passing old farms and fields that stretched far and wide. Maya sat in the back seat of the car, holding Eleanor's letter in her hand. She read parts of it again, letting the words sink deeper into her heart. It wasn't just a goodbye letter. It was a message filled with trust, love, something deeper. A passing of wisdom from one soul to another. When the car finally stopped in front of the cottage, Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. It was small, but beautiful. The walls were painted soft blue, and the white windows looked out onto the sparkling lake just beyond the trees. There was a porch with a wooden bench, and a narrow path led down to the water. The whole place looked like something out of a storybook, peaceful, quiet, untouched. She stepped out of the car and walked slowly up the steps. The driver handed her the keys, and Maya opened the door with trembling hands. Inside, everything smelled of wood and fresh air. There was a fireplace, a small kitchen, a reading nook by the window, and 2 cozy bedrooms. Sunlight poured in through the windows, making the whole place glow. It wasn't grand, wasn't fancy, but it felt warm, felt like home. On a table near the window, there was a vase with dried roses. Maya walked over and touched the petals gently. Leonard had said she once loved roses. Maybe she used to come here. Maybe this was the only place that still held her memories. Maya spent the whole afternoon walking through the cottage, touching the old books on the shelf, opening drawers filled with handwritten recipes and finding tiny pieces of Eleanor's life tucked away in quiet corners. She found a wool shawl folded neatly inside a wooden chest. It looked just like the one Eleanor used to wear to the diner. As the sun began to set, Maya walked down the path to the lake. The water was still and calm. Trees stood tall on the other side, their reflections painting the surface like a mirror. Maya sat on a bench near the edge and stared at the sky turning gold and pink. She could feel it again, Eleanor's presence. Not like a ghost, but like a feeling. Like a quiet voice whispering in her heart saying, "You're where you belong." Maya stayed at the cottage for 2 days. She slept in one of the bedrooms, ate simple meals, and read Eleanor's letter. Over and over again, she found peace there. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about tips, rent, or medical bills. She was thinking about possibilities, about what Eleanor had meant when she wrote, "I believe you'll know what to do with this." On the 3rd day, Maya returned to town. The ride back felt different. She wasn't just coming home. She was returning with something she hadn't had in years: purpose. That evening, she sat with her mother and told her everything. Her mother listened, smiling gently, eyes filled with pride. "You've always had a big heart," her mother said. "But now it's time to use it for something even bigger." Maya didn't sleep much that night. Her mind was racing. Money Eleanor had left wasn't just a gift. It was a tool. It's a chance to do something meaningful. But what? What would Eleanor have wanted? She thought about their quiet conversations, about the sadness in Eleanor's voice when she spoke of losing everything, about the loneliness, about being ignored. And then it came to her. She remembered all the old folks who came into the diner. People who sat alone, ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, and never talked much. Some of them had nobody. Some just wanted someone to ask how their day was, just like Eleanor. Forgotten people. People who still had stories to tell, if only someone would listen. The next morning, Maya called Richard. "I want to use part of the money for something," she told him. "Something in Eleanor's name?" Richard was quiet for a moment, then said, "Tell me. I want to start something that helps elderly people who are alone, people like Eleanor. Maybe a meal program. Maybe just something small at first. A way to remind them they still matter." Richard didn't hesitate. "I'll help you. We'll do it together." Within a month, Maya had filed the paperwork for a small nonprofit organization. She named it Eleanor's Table. It started as a simple idea: partner with local diners and cafes to offer free or low-cost meals for the elderly. No questions asked, no forms, no shame. It's just a warm plate of food and a kind word. The first partner was, of course, Maple Street. Diner, the owner, Mr. Jeffers, was surprised but agreed when Maya explained everything. A sign was placed in the window that read, "Eleanor's Table, pay what you can. Everyone is welcome." Soon, other small diners joined in. Maya used part of her inheritance to fund the meals quietly, but she didn't stop there. She created a volunteer program. Local students, retired nurses, and even former customers signed up to visit elderly people who couldn't leave their homes. They brought meals, shared conversations, and most importantly, made people feel seen. Maya worked harder than ever. But this time, her work gave her energy. Every time she saw someone smile over a hot plate of soup, she thought of Eleanor. One day, a woman named Mrs. Sims came into the diner. She was 90 years old and hadn't been outside in months. She held Maya's hand and said, "You don't know what this means. I used to sit alone every night. Now I look forward to Thursdays." Maya smiled through tears. Thursdays were special to someone I knew, too. Months passed and the foundation grew. A local newspaper did a story on it, then a radio station. Soon, people from other towns called, asking how they could start their own version of Eleanor's Table. Maya never took credit. She always said it started with someone else. "I'm just continuing it." One evening, Richard came too. Visit the diner. He watched quietly as Maya handed out meals, chatted with guests, and cleaned up afterward. "You know," said as they sat together, "I think my aunt would have cried seeing all this." Maya nodded. "I cry sometimes too, but it's the good kind." Richard smiled. "You've done something rare. You turned a small act of kindness into a movement." Maya looked around at the laughter, the stories, the shared meals. "She gave me the spark," she said. "I just lit the fire." As they talked, a new customer walked in, an old man. Thin, wearing a worn-out coat. He looked unsure, almost scared. Maya stood up and walked over to him. "Welcome," she said warmly. "Would you like some coffee and pie?" He nodded slowly. "How much is it?" "It's part of Eleanor's table," Maya said gently. "It's free today. You're our guest." The man looked at her with wide eyes. "No one's ever said that to me before." Maya guided him to a booth and placed a blanket around his shoulders. "You matter," she said softly. "Everyone does here." And just like that, another story began. Because sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures. A cup of coffee. A warm smile. A name remembered. And sometimes all it takes is one person to remind the world what kindness truly looks like. Eleanor had once been forgotten by her own family, but in the end, she had become the reason dozens of others were remembered. And Maya, the waitress, who simply saw someone sitting alone, had become the keeper of that memory, turning sorrow into service, loss into love. Let me know when you're ready for part 5. and I'll finish the story in the same gentle, emotional, and simple style. Maya Brooks had never imagined her life would change in such a big way. A few months ago, she was simply a waitress in a small-town diner, quietly working day and night to take care of her sick mother and trying to make ends meet. But now, everything felt different. It wasn't just about money or owning a cottage by the lake. It was about purpose, meaning, and the quiet woman who had once sat alone by the window every Thursday morning, the woman who had changed Maya's life forever, Eleanor's. Table, the small program Maya had started in her memory, was growing. What had started with one diner and a few volunteers had now spread to 3 nearby towns. Other cafes had joined in, and people had begun calling it a movement. Newspapers wrote about it. Radio stations invited Maya to speak, but she never saw herself as someone special. She always said the same thing. It all started with kindness. Eleanor gave me more than I ever gave her. Even though Maya was busier than ever, she still worked a few shifts at Maple Street Diner. She couldn't walk away completely. It was a part of her. It was where she met Eleanor. It was where her story truly began. Every Thursday, she still sat for a few minutes at the booth by the window, Eleanor's booth. She would drink her own cup of black coffee and look outside, just like Eleanor used to. It became her way of remembering. Her way of saying, "I haven't forgotten you." One Thursday morning, as Maya sat there quietly sipping her coffee, a young girl named Hannah, who had recently started volunteering with Eleanor's table, came and sat across from her. She was only 19, full of energy and ideas. "I've been thinking," Hannah said, smiling, "what if we started a small storytelling project? Like we record the old folks when they want to share their memories. Maybe we can even collect their recipes, their jokes, their life lessons, so nothing gets forgotten." Maya looked at her with surprise. "That's a beautiful idea." "Mean Eleanor's story inspired so much?" Hannah continued. "Maybe there are more stories out there, stories that no one listens to." Maya nodded slowly. "You're right. Sometimes listening is the most powerful thing we can do." Over the next few weeks, Maya helped Hannah and others set up the Memory Corner, a cozy little space inside the diner where older guests could sit and record their stories if they wanted to. A small microphone, a laptop, and a notebook were all it took. Soon they were collecting voices, stories about lost loves, childhood games, war memories, and simple moments of joy. Some made people laugh, some brought tears. But each one mattered. Maya kept thinking of Eleanor as she listened to those stories. She wished she had recorded Eleanor's voice, her laughter, her quiet pain. But maybe, in a way, Eleanor had already spoken through the lives she was now touching. Even after she was gone, the cottage by Lake Monroe had become more than just a quiet retreat. Maya had turned it into a place of rest and healing. She used part of Eleanor's inheritance to renovate the second bedroom, fix the roof, and repaint the walls. Every month, she invited one elderly guest from Eleanor's table, someone who had no family, or someone recovering from grief to stay there for a few days. It became a peaceful getaway. No internet, no TV, just books, the lake, and silence. One of the first guests was Mrs. Noreen, an 84-year-old woman who hadn't left her house in 5 years. She had lost her husband and daughter in the same year and had stopped smiling. After spending a weekend at the cottage surrounded by nature and letters left by other guests, she came back with a soft smile on her face. "I had forgotten what peace felt like," she told Maya, "but it was still there, just waiting."
Maya
Kept a guest book at the cottage where everyone wrote a message before leaving. And slowly, that book filled with messages of hope, healing, and thanks, all written in different handwriting, but with the same heart. Back in town, Maya was walking home one evening when she saw an old man sitting alone on a bench outside the library. His clothes were neat but old, and his face looked tired. Maya walked past him but then stopped. Something in her heart told her to turn back. She sat beside him and smiled. "Cold evening, isn't it?" He nodded but didn't speak. "I'm Maya," she said gently. "Would you like some hot tea? There's a diner nearby. I run a program. There, you don't have to pay." The man turned to her slowly. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "'Cause someone once offered me a chance when I wasn't expecting it," she replied. and it changed my life. For a moment, then nodded. All right, let's get some tea. They walked to the diner, sat at Eleanor's old booth. Maya served him tea, just like she had served Eleanor, and listened as he shared his story. A story about being a retired music teacher, losing his wife, and how no one seemed to remember his name anymore. Maya remembered what Eleanor once said. You reminded me that being seen is the greatest gift. After the man left, Maya sat alone and cried quietly. Not because she was sad, but because she had realized something. Eleanor hadn't just given her a gift. She had passed on a mission, a way to live. Later that night, as Maya walked home under the stars, she thought about how far she had come. Not long ago, she had been struggling to pay rent, worrying about every little dollar, unsure about the future. Now, she had a foundation, a lakeside cottage, and a growing community that believed in kindness. But more than that, she had found something most people spent a lifetime searching for. It's a reason to wake up every day and give. Richard Carrington visited again, this time with his wife and 2 young daughters. They wanted to see the diner, the memory corner, and meet the people behind Eleanor's table. His daughters sat with some of the elderly volunteers, asking questions and drawing pictures. This is what legacy looks like, Richard told Maya. Not tall buildings or bank accounts. This, Maya smiled. I didn't do it alone. Eleanor started it. I just followed the path. Before he left, Richard handed Maya a small box. She had more of these, he said. I found them in her safe. She made them when she was younger. Inside were 5 more rose pendants, just like the one Eleanor had given Maya. Maya held them carefully. I'll give these 2 people who carry her spirit forward. She did. One went to Hannah, who started the memory corner. One went to Mrs. Sims, who led the reading circle at Eleanor's table. One went to the music teacher she met on the bench. One went to her mother, who had always taught her to love quietly but deeply. And the last one Maya kept in her pocket, not to wear, but to give to someone special in the future, someone who would understand what it meant to see others with an open heart. Years passed. Eleanor's table grew into something beautiful. Other towns joined in. A documentary was made about the project. Maya was invited to speak at schools and community events, but she never forgot her roots. She never let it become about fame or attention. She still worked at the diner once a week, still visited the cottage, still sat at Eleanor's booth every Thursday. People often asked her, "What made you start this?" She always answered the same way. One day, a quiet woman walked into my life and sat alone by the window. I chose to sit with her, even if just for a moment. That moment changed everything. Eleanor Carrington had once lived in a mansion, attended business meetings, and been written about in newspapers. But in the end, it was her time spent quietly in a diner, with a kind-hearted waitress who saw her as a person. That gave her the peace she had been searching for. Maya kept a photo of Eleanor on her office wall, the one from the diner, not the old black and white one. In the photo, Eleanor sat by the window, holding a cup of coffee, eyes soft, lips curled into the tiniest smile. Maya looked at it every day. Because sometimes, all the greatest truths come from the quietest places. Sometimes, most powerful stories are hidden in silence. And sometimes, the people we overlook are the ones who leave behind the deepest legacy. Maya had no idea who the widow was until the day a billionaire walked in and told her the truth. But by then, Maya had already done something greater than recognizing Eleanor's name. She had seen her heart, and that made all the difference.